Rain covered the city the night Adrian Cole arrived at the crime scene. Blue police lights flashed across the wet apartment windows high above the street. Crowds gathered behind the barricades below, whispering quietly, while reporters pushed against officers for information. Adrian stepped out of the police car and looked up at the building. 22 floors, private security, no witnesses, and yet a man was dead inside a locked apartment. A young officer hurried toward him. "Victim's name is Victor Hale," the officer said nervously. 48 years old, financial consultant. Adrian adjusted his coat against the cold rain. "Anyone enter or leave the apartment?" The officer shook his head. "Security cameras show nobody." Adrian frowned slightly. Nobody entered. Nobody left. Still, Victor Hale had died with his throat cut open inside his own living room. The elevator ride to the 22nd floor felt unusually quiet. 2 homicide detectives already waited outside apartment 2204. Neither looked comfortable. One of them handed Adrian a pair of gloves. "You should see this yourself." The apartment door showed no sign of forced entry. No broken lock. No damaged frame. Inside, soft classical music still played quietly through hidden speakers. The entire apartment looked untouched. Expensive artwork hung across the walls. Crystal glasses rested neatly beside an unfinished bottle of wine. A fireplace burned softly near the balcony windows overlooking the city, and in the center of the living room lay Victor Hale, dead. His body rested perfectly flat on the marble floor with almost unnatural calmness. Only the blood ruined the image. A thin cut stretched across his throat, precise, clean. Adrian crouched beside the corpse silently. No signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no defensive wounds. The killer had either surprised Victor completely, or Victor willingly allowed the murderer close enough to kill him. A forensic technician approached carefully. "There's something else," she said quietly. She handed Adrian a small photograph sealed inside an evidence bag. The image showed Victor Hale standing outside this exact apartment building 3 nights earlier. But Victor was not alone. Far in the background, partially hidden beneath a streetlight, stood a tall, shadowy figure watching him. Adrian's eyes narrowed immediately. The figure wore dark gloves and a long black coat. No visible face, just darkness. The technician lowered her voice. "We found the same type of photograph at 3 older murder scenes in France, Germany, and Belgium." Adrian slowly looked up. 3 murders, 3 photographs, the technician continued. Interpol believes the same killer may be responsible. A cold silence filled the apartment. Adrian studied the photograph again carefully. The killer photographed the victims before murdering them. Not for evidence, for a reason, almost like a warning. "Anything missing from the apartment?" Adrian asked. "Not that we can tell." Adrian stood and slowly walked through the apartment. Everything looked controlled, organized, too organized. Then something near the office doorway caught his attention. A security camera mounted above the desk. He stepped closer. Not one camera, several, hidden carefully throughout the apartment. Adrian opened desk drawers nearby. Inside, he found dozens of labeled hard drives stacked neatly beside folders of photographs. Thousands of photographs, businessmen, politicians, police officers, judges, all secretly photographed from a distance. Watched, collected. One detective behind Adrian spoke quietly. "This doesn't look like a financial consultant. No, it looked like surveillance, blackmail, control." Adrian opened another drawer slowly. Inside rested a single envelope with no writing on it. He pulled it open carefully. Another photograph slid into his hand. This one made his chest tighten instantly. The image showed a woman standing outside a subway station earlier that same evening. Young, blonde, unaware she was being watched. And standing beside her in the photograph was Adrian himself. Written across the bottom in black ink were 4 simple words. "You missed her before." The photograph remained in Adrian's hand long after everyone else stopped speaking. Rain tapped softly against the apartment windows behind him. "You missed her before." The words felt personal. Too personal. Adrian stared at the woman beside him in the image. Blonde hair, dark coat. Standing near the subway entrance beneath pale streetlights, he recognized her immediately, but he could not understand why. One of the detectives stepped closer. "You know her?" Adrian hesitated. "I think so." That answer unsettled him more than anything else. He had spent 15 years investigating murders across the country. Faces blurred together after enough time, but this woman felt connected to something buried much deeper in his memory. Something unfinished. The forensic technician interrupted quietly. "There's more." She placed another evidence bag on the desk. Inside sat 3 additional photographs recovered from Victor Hale's private safe. Each showed a different murder victim from previous cases in Europe, and in every image, the same shadowy figure stood nearby watching them. Always hidden in the background, always present before the killings happened. Adrian spread the photographs across the desk carefully. France, Berlin, Prague, now this city. The killer moved across Europe methodically, patiently, and somehow Victor Hale knew about it before he died. Adrian looked toward the security hard drives stacked inside the drawers. "Get cybercrime down here immediately," he ordered. "I want every file copied before sunrise." The detectives nodded quickly. Hours later, Adrian sat alone inside the police station, reviewing surveillance records recovered from Victor's apartment. The deeper he looked, the worse it became. Victor Hale had secretly monitored hundreds of people for years. Private meetings, phone calls, hotel visits. Every file contained enough information to destroy lives. Judges accepting bribes, politicians meeting criminals, police officers taking cash. An entire hidden world buried beneath the city's polished surface. Then Adrian found her face again. The blonde woman from the photograph. Multiple files carried her image. Train stations, restaurants, crowded streets. Victor had followed her for months. One video clip finally displayed her full name, Elena Voss. Adrian leaned back slowly. The name triggered something inside him immediately. A memory, 4 years earlier. A witness statement buried inside an old homicide case. A young woman claiming she saw powerful men leaving a warehouse where several missing girls were last seen alive. Police dismissed her testimony after the evidence disappeared. Adrian remembered the case clearly now because it never made sense. Witnesses vanished, files went missing. The investigation collapsed overnight, and Elena Voss disappeared shortly afterward. Adrian's office phone rang suddenly. He answered without looking away from the screen. "Cole." A nervous officer spoke immediately. "Detective, we received another photograph." Adrian's chest tightened. "Where?" "It was left at the front desk 10 minutes ago." Adrian hurried downstairs. Half the station already crowded around the evidence table when he arrived. Nobody spoke. The new photograph rested beneath the bright overhead lights. Adrian felt cold the moment he saw it. The image had been taken only hours earlier. It showed Adrian leaving Victor Hale's apartment building during the storm. And standing across the street watching him was Elena Voss. Her face partially hidden beneath a hood, but she was not alone. Behind her stood the same shadowy figure from every previous murder photograph, this time much closer, almost directly beside her. Written across the bottom were new words. "She is not the next victim." The entire room remained silent. One detective finally whispered, "What the hell does that mean?" Adrian stared at the photograph carefully. Then another detail caught his attention. In the reflection of a nearby shop window, barely visible behind Elena and the shadowy figure, stood Adrian himself, holding a gun. His blood slowly turned cold, because Adrian had never been near that street before tonight. Yet somehow the photograph showed him there anyway. Brottenel to Grant. Nobody in the station slept that night. The second photograph remained pinned beneath the evidence board, while detectives argued quietly around it. Some believed the killer manipulated the image digitally. Others thought it was meant to confuse the investigation intentionally. But Adrian barely listened. He stood alone near the window staring at Elena Voss's face. She is not the next victim. Then who was? And why did the photograph place Adrian at a scene he had never visited? Morning fog covered the city when Adrian finally left the station. He drove directly to the subway entrance shown in the photograph. The streets remained mostly empty. Rainwater still covered the sidewalks from the storm overnight. Adrian studied the area carefully. Coffee shop, closed flower stand, security camera above the station stairs. He approached the nearby convenience store first. The elderly cashier recognized Elena immediately. "She was here 2 nights ago," the man said nervously. She looked frightened. "Did she say why?" Adrian asked. The cashier shook his head. But she kept watching the street like someone followed her. Adrian showed him the photograph of the shadowy figure. The cashier's face paled instantly. I saw him too. Adrian leaned closer. When? The same night. The old man lowered his voice. He stood across the road for nearly an hour, never moved. A cold feeling spread through Adrian's chest. Did you see his face? No. The cashier hesitated again. But I remember something strange. What? He looked directly at your reflection inside the store window. Adrian said nothing, because that was impossible. The photograph showing Adrian's reflection had not been public information yet. Hours later, Adrian finally located Elena's last known address. A small apartment above an abandoned bookstore near the river. The hallway smelled like cigarette smoke and damp wood. Apartment 4B stood slightly open when Adrian arrived. His hand moved slowly toward his holster. Then he pushed the door open carefully. The apartment was empty, but not abandoned. Coffee still sat warm on the kitchen counter. A desk lamp glowed softly in the corner. Someone had left recently, very recently. Adrian moved deeper inside. The apartment walls were covered with newspaper clippings and photographs. Missing persons, political scandals, unsolved murders, and in the center of everything hung Victor Hale's photograph, crossed out violently with red ink. Adrian searched the desk nearby. Inside he found handwritten notes describing a hidden organization operating inside the city for decades. Judges, businessmen, police officials. Names connected through blackmail and disappearances. Victor Hale appeared repeatedly throughout the notes, not as a victim, as a member. Adrian's pulse quickened. Then he noticed something else on the wall, a photograph of himself, taken recently, outside the police station, another taken outside his apartment, another inside a cafe last week. Someone had been watching him too. A sudden noise behind him made him turn instantly. A woman stood near the apartment doorway. Blonde hair, dark coat, sharp, frightened eyes, Elena Voss. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Adrian slowly lowered his gun. You've been hard to find, he said carefully. Elena looked exhausted, terrified. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. Adrian glanced around the apartment. You knew Victor Hale. I knew what he was. Which was? Elena stepped inside and locked the door quickly behind her. A collector. Adrian frowned slightly. Collector of what? Secrets. Silence filled the apartment. Elena looked toward Victor's crossed-out photograph on the wall. He ruined people's lives for powerful men. Adrian watched her carefully, and now he's dead. Elena's eyes slowly met his. He deserved worse. A deep silence followed that answer. Then Adrian reached into his coat and removed the second photograph, the one showing Elena beside the shadowy figure. Who is this? He asked quietly. The moment Elena saw the image, fear spread across her face instantly. She backed away from the table slowly. Where did you get that? She whispered. It was delivered to the station. Elena looked genuinely shaken now. That means he's getting closer. Who? Adrian demanded. Before she could answer, the apartment lights suddenly went dark. The entire room fell silent. Then someone knocked softly on the front door. 3 slow knocks. Elena's face lost all color. He found me. Pompensant. The apartment remained completely dark. Only weak grey daylight slipped through the rain-covered windows. 3 slow knocks echoed again through the silence. Elena stepped backward immediately. Pure fear filled her face now. Adrian moved quietly toward the door with his gun raised. Another knock. Slow, calm, patient. Adrian pressed himself against the wall beside the entrance. Police, he called firmly. Open the door slowly. Silence answered him. Then footsteps moved away down the hallway outside. Adrian opened the door instantly and rushed into the corridor. Empty. The long hallway stretched silent beneath flickering ceiling lights. Nobody near the stairs. Nobody near the elevator. Only a small envelope resting on the carpet directly outside the apartment. Adrian picked it up carefully. No fingerprints, no writing. Inside waited another photograph. This one showed Elena entering the apartment building earlier that morning, taken from across the street through heavy rain, and standing beside the entrance behind her was Adrian. Again, same coat, same face. Watching her. Written across the bottom were 5 simple words. You still don't remember? A cold silence filled the hallway. Adrian slowly looked back toward Elena, standing inside the apartment doorway. She looked horrified. What does that mean? He asked. Elena shook her head slowly. You really don't know. Adrian stepped toward her. Know what? But Elena was staring at something else now. The photograph in his hand. More specifically, the reflection behind him inside the apartment window. Adrian turned sharply. Nobody there. Yet Elena's breathing had become uneven. He's watching us right now, she whispered. Rain hammered harder against the windows outside. Adrian closed the apartment door and locked it again. Start talking, he said firmly. Elena remained silent for several seconds. Then she walked toward the evidence wall slowly. Victor Hale wasn't just blackmailing people, she whispered. He worked for them. The organization, Adrian asked. Elena nodded. They used surveillance, recordings, hidden cameras, anything they needed. Who are they? Elena hesitated. People with money, power, influence. She pointed towards several photographs pinned together with red string. Politicians, judges, police officials. Adrian noticed familiar faces among them, some very familiar. Then Elena pointed toward another photograph hidden near the corner. Adrian stepped closer. His stomach tightened instantly. The image showed a much younger Adrian standing beside another detective outside an old warehouse crime scene. Dated 11 years earlier, Adrian remembered the case immediately. Several girls disappeared near the docks. One body recovered. No arrests ever made. The investigation collapsed after evidence mysteriously vanished. Adrian looked toward Elena carefully. You were connected to that case. Elena's eyes darkened with pain. My sister disappeared there. Silence filled the room again. She was 16, Elena whispered. She never came home. Adrian slowly remembered her now. Not Elena, her sister. A witness photograph shown during the investigation years ago. Blonde hair, same eyes. Then Adrian noticed something worse. Another photograph pinned beneath the old warehouse image. It showed Adrian speaking privately with Victor Hale outside a courthouse 10 years earlier. Adrian frowned immediately. He had no memory of ever meeting Victor Hale before this week. What is this? He whispered. Elena stared at him carefully. You really don't remember him? Adrian looked closer at the photograph. Victor stood beside him, smiling calmly, while handing Adrian a folder. The date stamped across the image matched the exact week the warehouse investigation collapsed. A deep unease spread through Adrian's chest. No, he whispered. Elena stepped closer. Victor helped make evidence disappear, she said quietly. And somebody inside the police department protected him. Adrian slowly looked up. You think it was me? Elena didn't answer immediately. Then another sound interrupted the silence. A loud crash from the room above them. Both froze instantly. Footsteps followed, heavy footsteps moving slowly across the ceiling, back and forth, dragging something. Elena's face turned pale again. That's impossible, she whispered. Why? Adrian asked quietly. She looked directly at him. The apartment upstairs has been abandoned for years. The footsteps continued above them. Slow, heavy. Something scraped across the floor overhead. Adrian immediately drew his gun and moved toward the apartment door. Elena, stay here. No, she whispered quickly. I'm not staying alone. The hallway outside remained silent when they stepped out. Only the sound above them disturbed the building now. Apartment 5B sat directly over Elena's apartment, the abandoned unit. Adrian climbed the stairs carefully while Elena followed close behind. The scraping sound stopped the moment they reached the 5th floor. Silence swallowed the hallway instantly. A thick layer of dust covered the carpet outside 5B. No footprints, no signs anyone had entered recently. Yet faint light flickered beneath the apartment door. Adrian exchanged a glance with Elena. Then he forced the door open. The smell hit them immediately. Dust, mold, rotting paper. The apartment looked untouched for years. Furniture sat beneath white sheets. Broken glass covered the kitchen floor. Rain leaked slowly through cracked ceiling panels. But someone had definitely been inside recently. Fresh cigarette smoke still lingered faintly in the air. Adrian moved deeper into the apartment carefully. Then he stopped suddenly. One entire wall had been covered with photographs. Not random photographs. Crime scenes. Every major homicide Adrian investigated during the last 15 years. Victims, evidence photos, witnesses. And in the center of all of them hung Adrian's own picture. Dozens of them, watching him sleep. Leaving the station, standing outside crime scenes, some taken only days earlier. Elena stared at the wall in horror. "He's obsessed with you," she whispered. Adrian barely heard her. His attention locked onto another photograph near the center. A younger Adrian standing beside his former partner, Detective Marcus Vale. The image had been taken 12 years earlier. Marcus smiled directly at the camera, but someone had scratched his face out violently. Written underneath in black ink were 3 words. He chose them. Adrian's stomach tightened immediately. Marcus Vale died 3 years ago in a car accident. Or at least that was the official story. Elena slowly approached another table near the wall. Files covered its surface. Names, dates, bank transfers, surveillance records. Victor Hale appeared repeatedly throughout the documents, but not as a victim, as a handler. A man responsible for monitoring witnesses, paying officials, and controlling investigations. Adrian flipped through the papers rapidly. The deeper he looked, the darker everything became. Missing witnesses, disappearing evidence, bribed officers, entire investigations quietly erased. Then he found his own name, a sealed folder marked Cole. His pulse slowed instantly. Inside waited old internal police records from early in his career. One report described Adrian disobeying orders during the warehouse disappearance case. Another stated he requested search warrants against powerful businessmen connected to the investigation. Every request had been denied. Then Adrian found the final page. Transfer approved. Case closed due to insufficient evidence. Signed by Marcus Vale. Adrian stared at the signature silently. Marcus had shut the investigation down himself. The same week, Victor Hale appeared beside Adrian outside the courthouse. A terrible realization slowly formed inside his mind. Marcus was protecting someone. Maybe several people. Elena looked toward Adrian carefully. "You weren't helping them," she whispered. "You were getting too close." Before Adrian could answer, a sound echoed from another room deeper inside the apartment. A chair moving slowly across the floor. Both froze instantly. The noise came again, dragging closer. Adrian raised his gun and moved toward the dark hallway. The final room door stood slightly open. Light flickered softly inside. Very carefully, Adrian pushed the door wider. The room beyond looked completely different from the rest of the apartment. Clean, organized, recently used. A desk lamp glowed beside a wall filled with newspaper clippings and surveillance photos, and sitting calmly in the chair near the desk was Victor Hale, alive. Adrian stopped breathing. Victor slowly raised his eyes toward him, then smiled faintly. "You finally found the real story," he said quietly. Petulant Adrian stared at Victor Hale in complete shock. The man sitting in the chair should have been dead. Adrian personally saw the body inside apartment 2204. Saw the blood, saw the corpse, yet Victor now sat calmly beneath the desk lamp like nothing had happened. Elena backed away slowly. Her face had gone pale with fear. "No," she whispered. Victor folded his hands together peacefully. "You both look disappointed," he said softly. Adrian tightened his grip on the gun. "Who died in that apartment?" Victor smiled faintly. "A man unfortunate enough to resemble me." Silence filled the room. Adrian's mind raced rapidly. The corpse, the blood, the staged murder, everything had been planned carefully. "Why fake your death?" Adrian demanded. Victor leaned back in the chair. "Because people inside this city are beginning to panic." Lightning flashed outside the broken windows behind him. Victor's calm expression never changed. The killings were becoming inconvenient. Elena stared at him with disgust. "You helped them destroy lives." Victor looked toward her without emotion. "You misunderstand my role." "Then explain it." Victor's eyes slowly returned to Adrian. "I protected secrets." The answer felt colder than anger, like simple truth. Adrian stepped closer. "Protected them for who?" Victor remained silent for several seconds. Then he nodded toward the evidence wall behind them. "Everyone you see there, politicians, judges, business leaders, police officials, people who built careers while others disappeared quietly beneath them." Victor's voice stayed calm. The organization survived because someone kept control of information. Adrian's pulse quickened. The surveillance files. Victor nodded once. People fear exposure more than prison. Elena moved toward the desk suddenly. "You ruined my sister's case." Victor studied her silently. Then he answered without remorse. "Your sister saw something valuable." Elena's eyes filled with rage. She was 16. Victor lowered his gaze briefly. That did not matter to them. Adrian noticed something strange immediately. Victor kept saying them, "Not us." "You're afraid," Adrian said quietly. Victor smiled again. This time weaker. "Everyone is afraid now." Then Adrian noticed the packed suitcase beside the desk. Victor planned to leave the city. "You staged your death to escape," Adrian realized. Victor nodded slowly. "Because the man hunting them is getting closer." Silence returned instantly. The shadowy killer, the photographs, the murders across Europe. Adrian stepped nearer. "Who is he?" Victor's expression finally changed slightly. For the first time, real fear appeared in his eyes. "I never learned his name." Thunder shook the building outside, but he knows all of ours. Adrian frowned. The victims weren't random. "No," Victor whispered. Elena slowly understood too. The people dying across Europe shared connections to the same hidden network. Blackmail, corruption, disappearances. The killer wasn't selecting innocent victims. He was hunting members of the organization itself. One by one. Victor reached into his coat carefully. Adrian immediately raised the gun higher. Victor paused, then slowly removed a photograph. Not of a victim, of Adrian, taken years earlier outside the old warehouse investigation. "You came closer than anyone," Victor said quietly. Adrian stared at the image. "You were there that night," Victor continued. "At the docks." A cold sensation moved through Adrian's chest. Pieces of memory slowly returned. Rain, police sirens, Marcus Vale shouting at him to leave the scene, and a black car speeding away from the warehouse moments before officers arrived. Victor's voice cut through the memory. "You saw someone important leaving that building?" Adrian looked up sharply. "Who?" Victor hesitated. Then footsteps suddenly echoed from the apartment hallway outside, slow, calm. Approaching the room, Victor's face lost all color, instantly. "He found me," he whispered. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. Silence followed. Then a photograph slowly slid beneath the doorway across the wooden floor. Adrian picked it up carefully. The image showed Victor Hale sitting in this exact chair only minutes earlier, and standing behind him in the darkness was the shadowy figure. Written across the bottom were 6 simple words. He was never the real target. The room became completely silent. Victor stared at the photograph like he had already seen his own death. Elena slowly backed toward the wall, her breathing uneven. Adrian kept his gun aimed at the doorway. No movement followed. No footsteps. Only silence waiting outside the room. Then Victor whispered softly, "He wants you to understand." Adrian looked toward him sharply. Understand what? That this was never about revenge alone. Victor's hands trembled slightly now. The killer is trying to expose something. Another sound echoed faintly somewhere deeper inside the apartment building, an elevator door opening. Victor immediately stood from the chair. "We need to leave now." Adrian grabbed his arm before he could move. "You're not going anywhere." Victor looked directly into his eyes. "If I stay here, I die. You staged a murder scene." "Yes," Victor snapped quietly, "because people inside your department are helping him." The words hit Adrian hard. "What?" Victor pulled his arm free. "You still think this investigation belongs only to you?" He pointed toward the wall covered in surveillance photographs. "Half the people in those pictures already know where you are tonight." Adrian's pulse slowed painfully. Someone inside the police department had been leaking information, possibly for years. Elena stepped closer carefully. "Who inside the department?" Victor looked toward Adrian again. "That depends how much he remembers." Before Adrian could respond, his phone suddenly vibrated inside his coat pocket. Unknown number. He answered immediately. Cole. Silence. Then breathing. Slow. Calm breathing. The same breathing Adrian heard faintly in the background of several surveillance recordings earlier. Then a distorted voice whispered through the phone. "Apartment 5B. Adrian's blood turned cold. The caller continued softly. "You finally opened the right door." The line disconnected instantly. Victor looked terrified now. "He's inside the building," Elena whispered. A loud crash suddenly echoed somewhere below them. Then another. Police radios. Shouting. Adrian rushed toward the broken window and looked down at the street. 3 police cars had arrived outside the apartment building. Officers poured through the entrance below, but something felt wrong immediately. Too fast, too coordinated. Victor saw it too. "They're not here to arrest me," he whispered. Adrian turned sharply. "What are you talking about?" Victor pointed toward the hallway outside the room. "They're here to clean this up." Footsteps thundered through the apartment now. Multiple officers entering upstairs. Adrian recognized one voice instantly. Captain Daniel Mercer, head of internal investigations. Adrian's stomach tightened. Mercer almost never worked active scenes personally, especially not this quickly. Victor stepped backward toward another door hidden near the office shelves. "There's another exit." Adrian aimed the gun toward him again. "You're staying here." Victor shook his head slowly. "If Mercer finds me first, you'll never learn the truth." The hidden door behind Victor opened into a narrow stairwell descending deeper into the building. Adrian hesitated only briefly. Then heavy knocking exploded against the apartment entrance outside. "Police! Open the door!" Victor looked directly at Adrian. "You have 1 minute before they erase everything in this room." Elena grabbed Adrian's arm tightly. "He's telling the truth." The knocking grew louder. Then Adrian noticed something horrifying on the evidence wall behind Victor. A fresh photograph pinned there that definitely had not been there earlier. His own apartment building. Taken tonight. And standing near Adrian's apartment window was a woman. His wife, Claire. Written across the bottom were 4 simple words. "Now he loses her too." Adrian felt ice move through his chest. Then his phone vibrated again. A text message. "Unknown sender. Check your home security camera." With shaking hands, Adrian opened the live feed. The screen showed his dark apartment living room. Empty. For 2 seconds. Then the shadowy figure slowly stepped into view from the hallway behind Claire. "Claire!" Adrian's voice echoed through the apartment as he grabbed his phone tighter. The security camera feed shook slightly, while the shadowy figure moved silently behind his wife. Claire sat on the living room couch, unaware anyone stood there. Adrian's heart slammed against his ribs. "Call her!" Elena shouted. Adrian immediately dialed Claire's number. No answer. The apartment door outside exploded open at that exact moment. Police officers stormed into the hallway shouting commands. Victor grabbed Adrian's arm hard. "You need to leave now." Captain Mercer's voice thundered from the next room. "Cole! Drop your weapon!" Adrian ignored him. He kept staring at the phone screen. The shadowy figure slowly leaned closer behind Claire. Then the camera feed suddenly cut to black. Adrian felt panic hit him harder than any fear before. He shoved the phone into his pocket and followed Victor through the hidden stairwell instantly. Elena ran behind them while officers flooded the apartment upstairs. The narrow stairwell descended deep beneath the building, into darkness and leaking pipes. Mercer's angry voice echoed faintly above them. "Find Hale?" Victor moved quickly despite his age. "This way." The stairwell opened into an abandoned underground maintenance tunnel beneath the old river district. Cold water dripped from rusted pipes overhead. Flickering emergency lights barely illuminated the passage ahead. Adrian grabbed Victor by the coat violently. "You knew they'd come." Victor nodded once. "Mercer's been protecting the organization for years." Adrian's pulse quickened. "You have proof?" Victor pointed toward the briefcase still chained to his wrist. "Everything is here." Elena stared at the case carefully. "The surveillance files, names, payments, police reports, videos." Victor's face darkened. "Enough to destroy half the city." Adrian immediately thought about Claire again. The killer had entered his home because of this case. Because Adrian was getting too close. They hurried deeper through the tunnels until Victor suddenly stopped beside a rusted security gate. "This connects to the old courthouse district," he whispered. Adrian froze slightly at the word courthouse. The old courthouse. Another memory surfaced suddenly. 12 years earlier, Marcus Vale arguing with Captain Mercer in a courthouse hallway late at night. Victor Hale standing nearby holding folders. Adrian hearing Marcus say one sentence clearly before the door closed. If Cole learns the truth, everything falls apart. Adrian stopped walking completely. Elena noticed immediately. "What is it?" Adrian looked disturbed now. "I've been here before." Victor stared at him carefully. "Not just here," Victor whispered. "You were part of it from the beginning." Adrian shook his head slowly. "No. You investigated the warehouse disappearances too aggressively," Victor continued. "Mercer wanted you removed from the case." "And Marcus?" Adrian asked quietly. Victor's expression darkened. Marcus tried to protect you. Silence filled the tunnel. Adrian felt cold. Marcus Vale had been his mentor, closest friend in the department. You said Marcus protected them. Victor nodded slowly. At first. The tunnel lights flickered weakly overhead. Then he changed his mind. Adrian's breathing slowed painfully. What happened to him? Victor looked directly into his eyes. He was murdered. The words echoed through the tunnel. Not a car accident. Murder. Elena stepped closer slowly. By who? Victor hesitated. Then footsteps echoed faintly somewhere behind them. In the darkness, 3 slow footsteps. Everyone froze instantly. The sound stopped. Silence returned. Victor whispered carefully. He followed us. Adrian turned toward the darkness behind them. Nothing visible. Then a faint beam of light appeared deeper inside the tunnel. A flashlight moving slowly closer. The shadowy figure stepped partially into view beneath the flickering lights. Tall, dark coat, black gloves. Still impossible to see the face clearly. Victor's breathing became terrified. Elena, Adrian whispered carefully, stay behind me. But Elena wasn't looking at the figure. She was staring at Adrian instead, fear slowly filling her eyes. Then she whispered something that made his blood run cold. I remember you now. The tunnel fell silent except for dripping water echoing through the darkness. Adrian slowly turned toward Elena. What did you say? Her face had gone pale. Not with fear of the shadowy figure anymore, fear of him. I remember you, she whispered again. The flashlight beam in the distance remained perfectly still, watching them. Victor lowered his eyes quietly. Adrian felt something terrible shifting inside his memory now. Fragments. Rain near the warehouse docks years earlier, police sirens, a frightened girl crying behind a locked metal door, and Elena, younger, covered in blood, grabbing Adrian's coat while begging him not to leave. You promised you'd help us, Elena whispered painfully. Adrian staggered back slightly. The memory hit him harder now. He had seen her before. At the warehouse. The night the investigation collapsed. You disappeared after that, Adrian said weakly. Elena nodded slowly. Because they told me you betrayed us. Silence spread through the tunnel. Victor finally spoke quietly. That was the plan. Adrian looked toward him sharply. What plan? Victor sighed heavily. The organization needed someone inside the department to take responsibility if the case ever reopened. A cold realization slowly formed inside Adrian's mind. They chose me. Victor nodded. Mercer manipulated evidence to make it appear you mishandled the investigation. Elena's eyes filled with anger, and Marcus helped cover it up. Victor shook his head slowly. Marcus tried to stop it later. The flashlight beam deeper in the tunnel moved closer again. Still silent, still patient, Adrian barely noticed now. His entire world was collapsing around him, piece by piece. He spent years believing the warehouse case failed because of missing evidence and corrupt officials. But someone had carefully shaped the story afterward. Made Adrian look responsible. Protected the real people involved. Victor opened the chained briefcase carefully. Stacks of files filled the inside. Old surveillance photos, bank transfers, confidential police reports. Victor removed a single folder and handed it to Adrian. Inside waited photographs from the warehouse investigation. Several showed powerful businessmen entering the building hours before police arrived. Then Adrian saw the final image. Captain Mercer standing beside Victor Hale near the warehouse entrance. And behind them, a younger Adrian unconscious inside the back of a police car. His blood turned cold instantly. I don't remember this, he whispered. You were drugged, Victor said quietly. Marcus got you out before they could frame you completely. Adrian stared at the photograph in disbelief. Then Elena spoke again softly. The real victims were never the people being murdered now. Adrian slowly looked up at her. She pointed toward the files in Victor's briefcase. These people destroyed lives for decades. Missing girls, witnesses silenced, blackmail operations, murders disguised as accidents. Every so-called victim killed by the shadowy figure belonged to the same hidden network. The serial killer was not targeting innocent people randomly. He was hunting members of the organization itself, one by one. Victor's voice lowered carefully. He calls it justice. The flashlight beam stopped only a few meters away now. The shadowy figure remained hidden behind darkness. Then the distorted voice finally spoke. Calm, Controlled. Victor lied to all of you. Everyone froze. The figure stepped slightly closer beneath the weak tunnel lights. Still no clear face visible. Adrian raised his gun carefully. "Who are you?" The figure ignored the question. Instead, he looked directly at Adrian. "You spent years hunting the wrong people." Adrian's pulse quickened painfully. The figure continued quietly. Victor Hale was never protecting secrets. Victor's expression darkened instantly. He created them. Silence exploded through the tunnel. Elena slowly looked toward Victor in shock. The figure stepped closer again. He recorded disappearances, arranged blackmail, sold evidence to powerful men. Victor backed away slightly. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," the figure interrupted coldly. Then the figure pointed directly at Adrian. The organization survived because he taught them how. Adrian slowly turned toward Victor. The older man looked terrified now, not of the police, not of exposure, of the truth finally catching him. Then the shadowy figure spoke one final sentence, soft, certain. "The real victim in this story was always you, Detective Cole." The tunnel lights flickered weakly overhead. Nobody moved. Victor Hale stood frozen beside the rusted gate, clutching the briefcase tightly, while Adrian kept the gun raised toward the shadowy figure. "The real victim was always you." The sentence echoed painfully inside Adrian's mind. Elena slowly stepped away from Victor now. Fear and disgust mixed across her face. "You used all of us," she whispered. Victor's calm mask finally began breaking apart. "You think this man is innocent?" he snapped suddenly. "He's murdered dozens of people across Europe." The shadowy figure remained motionless in the darkness. Then he answered quietly, "I killed the people who destroyed lives and buried the evidence." Victor laughed bitterly. "So now you call yourself a hero?" "No," the answer came instantly. "Just the consequence." A deep silence filled the tunnel. Adrian slowly lowered the gun slightly. He could feel the entire investigation changing shape around him now. Victor Hale, Captain Mercer, Marcus Vale. The warehouse disappearances, all connected. But not in the way Adrian believed. The figure stepped closer again beneath the weak tunnel light. For the first time, Adrian could partially see his face, scarred skin near the jaw, tired eyes. A man older than Adrian expected, not emotionless, exhausted. Victor immediately recognized him fully. "You should died years ago," Victor whispered. The man's expression hardened. "So should the children you sold." Elena gasped quietly. Adrian felt ice spread through his chest. Victor looked away instantly. The shadowy man continued calmly. "The warehouse wasn't the beginning." He pointed toward Victor's briefcase. "It was only one operation." Adrian slowly opened another file inside the case. Photographs spilled into his hands. Shipping containers, passport records. Lists of missing girls from multiple countries. Human trafficking. For years. Victor whispered carefully, "You don't understand the people behind this." "I understand enough," Adrian said coldly. The tunnel fell silent again. Then the shadowy man looked directly at Adrian. "Marcus Vale tried to expose them before he died." Adrian's breathing slowed instantly. "What?" The man reached into his coat slowly and removed a small recorder. He tossed it across the tunnel floor toward Adrian. Adrian picked it up carefully. Marcus's voice immediately played through static. "If anything happens to me, Mercer is involved." Adrian froze. The old recording continued. "Victor controls the evidence network. Mercer controls the department." A long silence followed on the tape. Then Marcus whispered something weaker. "Cole was never supposed to take the blame." The recording ended abruptly. Adrian lowered the recorder slowly. Marcus really had tried to protect him. Victor suddenly moved toward the tunnel exit. Adrian reacted instantly and shoved him hard against the wall. "It's over," Adrian said sharply. Victor's face twisted with panic. "No, you still don't understand." The tunnel lights flickered violently again. Then police sirens echoed faintly above ground nearby. Mercer's officers were getting closer. Victor looked desperately toward Adrian. "If Mercer catches me alive, none of us survive tonight." The shadowy man stepped forward calmly. "He won't." Adrian finally understood something terrifying. The killer never intended to hide forever. He had been forcing the truth into the open piece by piece. Every murder, every photograph, every message, all leading back to this moment. Victor whispered shakily. "What do you want from me?" The shadowy man stared at him without emotion. "The names." Victor hesitated. Then distant gunshots suddenly echoed through the tunnels behind them. Everyone froze. Mercer's people had entered underground. The shadowy man looked toward the darkness briefly, then back at Adrian. "You have 1 hour before they erase everything." Adrian tightened his grip on the recorder. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. The man remained silent for several seconds. Then he answered softly, "My sister disappeared at the warehouse too." Elena's eyes widened instantly. The man looked toward her gently now. "You knew her?" Elena stared at him in disbelief. "Daniel," she whispered. The shadowy figure nodded once. Then Adrian finally understood the truth. The serial killer was not a stranger hunting random victims. He was a survivor. Someone the organization failed to silence years ago. And now he was hunting everyone responsible. Gunshots echoed again through the tunnels behind them. Closer this time. Dust drifted from the ceiling while distant police voices moved through the underground passageways. Captain Mercer's team was searching fast. Victor Hale looked ready to collapse. Daniel remained calm beside the shadows, watching every tunnel entrance carefully. Adrian stepped toward him slowly. "You've been killing them for years." Daniel nodded once. "They buried hundreds of lives." Elena stared at him painfully. "You should gone to the police." A bitter smile crossed Daniel's face. The police helped them. Nobody argued with that. Not anymore. Adrian looked down at Marcus Vale's recorder again. The truth finally felt unavoidable now. Marcus discovered the organization years earlier. Victor managed their surveillance and blackmail system. Mercer protected them from inside the department, and Adrian had been manipulated into carrying the blame if everything ever surfaced publicly. Victor suddenly spoke weakly. "You still don't know the worst part." Daniel's expression darkened immediately. "Don't." Victor ignored him. He looked directly at Adrian. The final target was never Mercer. Adrian felt his stomach tighten. "What are you talking about?" Victor's terrified eyes slowly shifted toward Daniel. "He's been planning this since the warehouse fire." Elena frowned slightly. "There was no fire." Victor laughed nervously. "Because they covered it up." Silence filled the tunnel again. Victor continued shakily. "The organization burned the evidence after the disappearances." Adrian's pulse quickened painfully. Fire, smoke. Suddenly another buried memory returned. A burning warehouse near the docks. Marcus dragging Adrian toward a police car while explosions echoed behind them. Someone screaming inside the flames. Adrian staggered slightly. "I was there," he whispered. Victor nodded slowly. "Yes." Daniel looked away into the darkness. They thought everyone inside died. Elena's eyes widened. "You survived the fire." Daniel remained silent for several seconds. Then he answered quietly, "My sister didn't." The tunnel became completely silent again. Everything Daniel had done suddenly made horrifying sense. The murders, the revenge, the years of hunting. Victor whispered carefully. He spent 12 years finding every person involved. Adrian slowly realized something worse. Not every person. Daniel finally looked directly at him. For the first time, real sadness appeared in his eyes. "No," Daniel admitted softly. Victor backed farther against the wall. "He saved you for last." Elena looked between them in confusion. "Why, Adrian?" Daniel reached slowly into his coat and removed one final photograph. He handed it toward Adrian carefully. The image showed the warehouse fire years earlier. Smoke covered the night sky. Marcus Vale dragged an unconscious Adrian toward safety, while police lights flashed everywhere. But near the burning entrance behind them stood another figure, a man holding a gun, Captain Mercer, and directly beside Mercer was Adrian's wife Claire, much younger, watching the fire. Adrian stopped breathing completely. "No." Daniel's voice remained calm. Claire's father financed the organization. The tunnel spun around Adrian. "That's impossible." Victor lowered his head slowly. "You married into the family without knowing." Adrian stared at the photograph in horror. Claire knew Mercer years before Adrian ever met her. Daniel spoke quietly again. "Marcus hid that truth from you." Adrian's mind raced violently now. Claire, the warehouse fire, Mercer. His entire life suddenly felt built on lies he never saw. Then his phone vibrated again. "Claire calling," Adrian answered immediately. "Claire!" Her voice trembled through the speaker. "Adrian, someone's here." Static crackled behind her. Then Mercer's voice spoke faintly nearby. "Give me the phone." Adrian felt cold terror spread through his body. Mercer took the phone calmly. "You finally know too much," Mercer said softly. Gunfire exploded somewhere deeper in the tunnels again. Mercer continued, "Bring Victor Hale to the old courthouse." Adrian's breathing slowed. The courthouse, where the conspiracy first began. Mercer's voice lowered one final time. "Come alone if you want your wife alive." Rain hammered the city again by the time Adrian reached the old courthouse. The massive stone building stood abandoned at the edge of the river district, like a forgotten monument to corruption. Broken windows stared into the storm. Police barricades from years earlier still rusted near the entrance gates. Adrian stepped from the car slowly with Victor Hale beside him in handcuffs. Daniel remained hidden somewhere nearby in the darkness. Watching, waiting, Elena stayed behind for safety. The courthouse doors stood slightly open. Warm light flickered inside. Adrian entered carefully with his gun raised. Every footstep echoed through the empty halls. The building smelled like dust, rainwater, and old paper. Then he heard Claire crying softly somewhere ahead. Adrian followed the sound into the main courtroom. Captain Mercer stood near the judge's bench, holding Claire tightly beside him. Several armed officers surrounded the room. Corrupt officers. Victor immediately looked terrified again. Mercer smiled faintly when Adrian entered. "You came alone." Adrian stared at Claire carefully. She looked frightened, confused. "Not guilty," Victor whispered nervously. "You promised protection." Mercer looked toward him coldly. "You became a liability." Adrian slowly understood. Mercer never intended to let Victor survive tonight, or Adrian, or Claire. This was the final cleanup. Mercer stepped forward calmly. "For years we controlled every investigation in this city," he said quietly. Then Daniel survived the fire. Lightning flashed through the broken courtroom windows. Mercer's face hardened. He turned revenge into obsession. Victor shook violently beside Adrian. "You said nobody would ever find out." Mercer looked disgusted now. "You recorded too much." Then Mercer's eyes slowly moved toward Adrian. "And Marcus almost ruined everything protecting you." Adrian's chest tightened painfully. "You killed him." Mercer smiled faintly. He stopped being useful. Silence filled the courtroom. Rain echoed against broken glass outside. Then Claire suddenly spoke through tears. "My father worked for them," she whispered. Adrian looked at her in shock. "I didn't know until years later." Mercer tightened his grip on her arm instantly. "She knows enough now to become dangerous." Adrian raised the gun carefully. "Let her go." Mercer laughed softly. "You still don't understand your role in this story." The officers around the room slowly aimed their weapons toward Adrian. Mercer continued calmly. "The organization needed a clean detective the public trusted." Adrian's stomach twisted. "You framed me." Mercer nodded. "If the warehouse case reopened, blame would eventually fall on you." Victor whispered shakily. "He was always the backup plan." Adrian finally understood the terrifying truth completely. The original victim was never Victor Hale, never the people Daniel murdered. It was Adrian, his reputation, his career, his life. Everything had been arranged years before he ever noticed. Then another voice echoed through the courtroom darkness. "You should have left him out of it." Daniel stepped from the shadows near the rear balcony, holding a rifle steady toward Mercer. Officers immediately turned their weapons toward him. Tension exploded across the room instantly. Mercer sighed heavily. 12 years of bodies just to end up here. Daniel's eyes never left him. "You burned children alive." Mercer's expression remained empty. "They were witnesses." Claire gasped softly. Even Victor looked horrified hearing the words aloud. Daniel slowly moved closer. "You destroyed families for money." Mercer shrugged slightly. "That's how powerful men survive." Gunfire suddenly exploded across the courtroom. Everything happened instantly. One corrupt officer fired toward Daniel. Daniel fired back. Glass shattered everywhere. Adrian grabbed Claire and pulled her behind a wooden bench as bullets tore through the courtroom. Victor tried running toward the exit. Mercer shot him in the back without hesitation. Victor collapsed across the courtroom floor, dead instantly. Chaos swallowed the building. Then one final gunshot echoed louder than all the others. Silence followed. Adrian slowly looked up. Mercer stood frozen near the judge's bench, blood spreading across his chest. Daniel lowered the rifle slowly from across the room. Mercer staggered backward once, then collapsed dead beneath the old courthouse seal. Rain continued pouring outside. The surviving officers slowly lowered their weapons. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The nightmare had finally ended. Hours later, police and emergency lights surrounded the courthouse, while news reporters crowded the streets outside. Corruption files from Victor's briefcase spread across every major news network by sunrise. Arrests began immediately across the city. Judges, politicians, police officials. An entire hidden empire collapsed overnight. Near dawn, Adrian stood alone beside the courthouse steps, watching rainwater flow across the empty streets. Daniel approached quietly beside him. "You could've arrested me years ago," Daniel said softly. Adrian looked toward him. "You gave the truth a chance first." Daniel stared at the storm silently. "My sister deserved justice." Adrian nodded slowly. "She did." Police sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Daniel stepped backward toward the shadows. Adrian never raised his gun, never stopped him. Within seconds, Daniel disappeared into the rain completely. Gone. Claire slowly joined Adrian beneath the courthouse steps. Both stood silently, watching the sunrise begin through the storm clouds. Then Adrian finally looked back toward the old courthouse one last time. The place where everything began, and where he finally realized the terrifying truth. He had spent years hunting the wrong victim.